Greetings, all you accidental island inhabitants. This is KFM, and I'm broadcasting from somewhere between Alaska and Australia. I'll give you more details later. When we first met Danny, we learned a little bit about her background and a little bit about how she came to be on this wonderful little island. Won't go into too much more detail here. Needless to say, Linear Airlines is probably not getting a positive online review. Danny awoke to a throbbing headache, reached up, felt dried blood on her temple. Great, she thought as she looked around, the high sun piercing her eyes with its brilliance. A head wound is all I need to start my day. Her legs wobbled beneath her as she stood in the raft for a better view, but was honestly afforded only a glance as the sleek body of a waiting shark passed beneath the raft. With a gasp, she quickly grabbed the paddle and began to row the not very tooth-resistant craft toward the safety of the nearby beach. She looked around, both in an attempt to get her bearings and to see if she could spy signs of civilization or activity on the horizon. Without binoculars or a telescope, she could see nothing but the faint outlines of distant islands, none of which looked inhabited. She did see what looked like ships docked at one or two of them, which gave her hope. She saw, as her gaze returned to her own island, a beach ship of what she could only assume to be Polynesian design. Her heartbeat and hope rising, Danny raced toward the craft, calling out eagerly to its owners for help. There was no answer save for the wind rustling through the hull. She glanced around, assuming that the survivors would have possibly made camp further inland, but could see zero signs of any inhabitants. "Hello?" she continued to call out meekly as she walked around the bow and spied a gaping hole in the porthole. "Is anyone here?" she asked, carefully jumping into the maw. It was as she had feared, stripped and derelict, and aged with the heavy hand of nature's neglect. Even the restroom was unusable. As she made her way through the ship's sparse galley, her stomach began to rumble slightly, reminding her that food and water were key components in survival. She paused and checked both drawers and cabinets, finding not even insects to eat for raw protein. With a resigned sigh, she made her way up to the top deck for what she hoped would be a better view of the distant shores, at least. The answer remained the same. No sign of light glinting off far-off buildings, no signs of moving watercraft, commercial or recreational. No signs of human life at all. She strummed her fingers on the weather-worn railing and muttered a sarcastic, "I'm the queen of the world," parody of Jack's line from the movie Titanic, before turning to continue her exploration of the ship. So lost in thought was she about her increasingly darkening mood that she walked past the control console in a blind haze before rushing back to see if there was a radio, charts, or anything useful. There was not. About the only thing still functional on the craft seemed to be the compass, and even that was probably questionable. She could see an empty socket where a radio had probably been mounted at one point, but its glaring absence now, along with the empty drawer for navigational tools, let her know that the owners of this boat were probably rescued years ago and left the rest of the craft to rot. She descended the foreladder and began to look around. Useless rotting furniture lay strewn about, and the only thing that looked to be halfway useful was a lone crate lying on the floor. The hinges were a bit rusted and resisted opening, but finally relented to her efforts, revealing what looked to be a coil of rope made from some type of fibrous leaves. A solar-powered lantern that she hoped still worked, and an empty fuel can. "Great," she groaned as she took it all. "Why did I have to leave my phone on the plane instead of leaving it in my pocket like a smart person?" As she made her way back up to the deck and peered down. There was no way she was jumping. The last thing that she needed right now was a broken leg. Her meager supplies in tow, she made her way back the way she had come and safely exited the ship. Danny returned to the starboard side of the ship, where she had seen the barrel, and looked for more useful items. She found some spears, another lantern, and a pick. Upon closer inspection, she noted that the spears and pick looked crude and primitive, a sign that the sailor or sailors aboard the vessel had been there long enough to at least fashion tools. She needed to do the same. While the pick was not designed for the task, Danni used it to chop down some young palm bunches and to rip a sizable stick from a nearby cluster of driftwood. She sharpened one of the loose stones that she had found into a workable blade, and fashioned her own coil of rope from the palm fronds, using it to bind the rock to the stick to make the simple knife. She kept a wary eye on the horizon and an ear open for engines, unsure if the pilot had managed to broadcast their position or trajectory. Not that it really would have helped, she thought as she began to strip more sticks from the driftwood pile with the knife. She didn't know how far her raft had drifted from the crash site or how long she had been out. Rescue planes or ships could have passed by while she was unaware, or could be miles away, searching the wrong area. Not wanting to burn herself alive on a wooded island, Danni selected a high point on the beach for her signal fire and stacked the wood, using kindling to draw out the flame within minutes. A smile crossed her slightly chapped lips at the flickering light. It was daylight still, so the chances of the actual fire drawing help were minimal, but the thin gray finger of smoke that it emitted would certainly help scream, "Help! Someone is here." Danni simply mounded up a small ridge of dirt around the campfire and hoped for the best, as she started to make her way toward the foothill slope of the plateaus for a better view. As she ascended, she heard the warning rattle of some kind of snake, but couldn't see it. She kept her eyes peeled as she warily gave the area a wide berth. The last thing she needed was venom in her veins. After a time, she spotted a feral boar, which gave her some hope. Snakes and crabs could provide some meat for meals, sure, but in greater quantities than a single boar could provide. She made a mental note to do some hunting for this little bacon on the hoof after getting a campsite established. Almost as a reminder that she was not the most dangerous animal on the island, a second snake made its presence known. Startled, Danni leaped onto a nearby rock and looked for the source of the rattle, its owner eluding her sight in the unkempt grass. She had reached the second of the 3 plateaus and surveyed the site. It was wooded, which was nice, but also offered a more elevated view of the surrounding ocean. A dot of yellow caught her eye as she continued along the serpentining path. It was a guava fruit, one of her favorite garnishes for tropical drinks, and a delight to her senses as she plucked and ate it. While it was no canteen of water, the fresh moisture that squeezed from the rich pulp was a gift from the gods to her dry throat. As fast as her smile had come from the fruit, it faded with the arrival of yet another rattle. She had been carrying her spears, and spotting the source this time, decided that it was time to both eliminate the threat and to put meat on the menu for the night. She carefully steeled herself for the throw and pitched the weapon, expecting an unarmed snake to go slithering off into the underbrush, but gasped in shock and delight as it gave a loud hiss and dying rattle, convulsing in its death throes around the invading spearhead. After a moment, it stopped moving. Fully aware that venomous snakes could still strike post-mortem, she retrieved her weapon and proceeded to carefully butcher the snake, just to make sure it was dead, as well as to obtain its protein-rich meat. It was a night snake. Danni was mildly disappointed when she topped the crest to the zenith of the mesa. Visibility, despite the height, was still a bit low due to the rocky ridge which defined the space. Despite this, she climbed carefully to the top of a high cropping, thankful that she had worn comfortable shoes with treads instead of more fashionable shoes with slick soles. Still lacking any sort of spyglass or binoculars, she took a look around, but could see little more than bleak and barren surroundings in the light of the setting sun. Danni gave a saddened sigh and made her way down the outcropping again. Soon it would be too dark to explore safely, even with lanterns, and she wanted to go back down toward the beach where she could set up some sort of shelter for the night and eat the snake before it spoiled. As if in vindictive response to her thought of the dead snake, another gave off an angry rattle. Not wanting to press her luck in the fading light as far as hunting, Danni avoided it and continued along the path. Discovering a fragrant pee-pee flower along the way. It was not just the scent that made her smile, however, as the corner of her eye sought out signs of any snakes. Her trips to the Philippines had taught her that the pee-pee flower was medicinal, acting as an antitoxin when mixed into a potion of sorts. If she did get bitten, at least she knew there was hope for her recovery. As it was, she had not been bitten, yet, so she left the flower to bloom until it might be needed, as freshness of ingredients was often a key to their potency. While Danni knew that she would most likely be able to weave leaves and palm fronds into a viable shelter, she began to inspect the cliff face for niches and caves, knowing that those might serve for a little better protection from the elements should a storm roll through. The first one she found was a literal alcove with barely enough room for her to stand in, much less lie down in. The second, however, was much more deep and suitable. So much so that she found the remnants of the sailors' camp still largely intact. Swatches of sailcloth, rations, and another lantern lying about, as well as a homemade cot. Yet there was no sign of the former occupant, not even a body. She dropped her crate and shuffled items around in her inventory, making room for some firewood and kindling that she had made earlier. True, she still had a fire on the beach, but it would be dying soon, and making one at the cave entrance was a wiser choice for both light and a place to cook. She returned to the beach and checked her signal fire. Her assumption had been correct, and she knew it would burn out soon. Not wanting to waste the effort or resources to refresh it, she picked up the kindling and made her way back up the beach to check the raft for supplies. In its small pouch she found bandages and more rations. There was a compass as well, but her melancholy about the situation made her leave it in the raft for now, to prevent it from either being lost or, worse yet, reminding her of the hopelessness of her situation. Besides, the dashboard compass on the wrecked ship had already told the same tale that the handheld compass probably would anyway. The light gone, she ventured off toward the cave entrance. Her first day on the island, which she had dubbed La Isla de Madre Fluente, or, roughly, Driftwood Island, was coming to a close. She cracked her knuckles and built her second campfire. Selecting a larger stick from the bunch to serve as a spike for the meat. Settling down on the dust-covered cot to await the meat to finish cooking and for sleep to come calling. If you liked this episode, please do me a favor and hit the like button, and leave a comment about what you either liked or disliked so that I can continue to improve your experience. If you want to see more episodes of Danny Driftwood, please hit the subscribe and bell icons. Passing ships might not hear the bell, but YouTube will. If you would like to chat with me, a link to the Discord server can be found in the description, and trained crabs are standing by with freshly minted membership cards for you. I can also be found on the Stranded Deep Steam forums, and while there, if you don't have a copy of Stranded Deep, be sure to pick one up. There are also links in the description for my Twitter and Instagram accounts. Thank you very much for watching, and remember the Stranded Deep motto, stay alive. Until the next time, this is Campin, signing off.